Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Astro Consciousness channel. I'm Millie, and I am here to give you your forecast for the new moon in Sagittarius taking place on either November 30th or December 1st, depending on your time zone. In this channel, we talk about the astrological energy of the week ahead and how you can integrate it into your personal and spiritual growth. As always, I like to start every week with a recap of where we're coming from in order to understand where we are headed. And unlike other videos, unlike other weeks, instead of just recapping just the last week, I kind of want to give a broad recap of the last couple of months and why they make a difference to this new moon in Sagittarius. So by the time that this new moon in Sagittarius comes along, we've been several days into Sagittarius season. And that Sagittarius season started truly with a beautiful connection between the sun in Sagittarius sextiling Pluto newly entered in Aquarius. If you recall from last week's video, I talked about how this sextile between the sun and Sagittarius, which is an optimistic outlook towards the future, sextile Pluto in Aquarius, really was the opening and the invitation to remember that things can, in fact, unfold differently, and they will. And the willingness we have to move into a little bit of a discomfort, into a part of our lives that is pretty unknown, with the understanding that we are always guided, supported, and provided for along the way. Now, prior to Sagittarius season, obviously we had Scorpio season and Libra season and Virgo season, right? And during Virgo and Libra season, we experience eclipses that really, as eclipse seasons do, brought up a lot of things for a lot of people in terms of relationship, in terms of the realization of where they belong or where they don't belong, where they want to give their time, energy, effort, attention, love, right? And what I mean by that is people really began to realize with that eclipse season, this is what feels honest to who I am now. These are the connections in my life that feel genuine, and making parting ways with certain things, certain situations, certain people that didn't really feel aligned with who we are now. And I think that once that season passed and we entered Scorpio season, this Scorpio season really lent itself to get so very honest, to accept the truth of what was in front of us, everything that unfolded about eclipse season, and to kind of grieve that a little bit, let it, let certain situations, certain things die. I think that Scorpio season was a season that actually made a lot of people in some way, shape, or form make permanent decisions around where they were going to live, how they were going to interact with certain people in their lives. They really made commitments to themselves about where they want to put, again, their time, their energy, and effort. Scorpio season was a very decisive season that I don't think felt necessarily too emotional as much as it really asked us to get honest and us being willing to answer the call of that honesty. And with that, the understanding that certain things have to come to an end in order for us to be with an integrity with ourselves. So much of the last couple of seasons leading up to this Sagittarius season and leading up to this new moon in Sagittarius had to do with first getting clear around certain things. And now here we are at the beginning of this Sagittarius season with actually a really beautiful new moon in Sag that tells us that we still have some things to more than just reconsider, remember about who we are. And so this is how I want to begin talking about the new moon in Sagittarius. I'm going to share my screen so that we can see that new moon chart together. And as I mentioned earlier, this new moon in Sagittarius takes place either on November 30th or December 1st, depending on your time zone. As we can see here, the new moon in Sagittarius takes place at 9 degrees Sagittarius. And what is the ruler of Sagittarius doing? Well, ruler of Sagittarius is Jupiter, and it's currently retrograde in the sign of Gemini. And the ruler of Gemini is Mercury, and Mercury is also retrograde in the sign of Sagittarius. So here we have two planets that are in each other's signs. This is known as mutual reception, and both of them are retrograde. So it's essentially like they're both giving off the exact same energy. So what does that mean? So based on everything I've recapped about the last couple of seasons, very broadly, by the way, that has brought us to this new moon in Sagittarius. This new moon in Sagittarius that says, I'm setting the intention to begin something much more expansive for myself. I'm setting the intention to really live my life according to the truth of who I've discovered myself to be over the last couple of months, over the last couple of seasons. I'm setting the intention to begin something that puts my light out there, something that perhaps I teach or something that perhaps I learn, right? I'm setting the intention to broaden my horizons, whether physical or not, in terms of what I know, so that I can learn more about life. Now, the fact that Jupiter is retrograde in Gemini and Mercury is retrograde in Sagittarius, and both of these planets are in a pretty, a pretty tight opposition to one another, tells me that we are still integrating a lot of this energy. And beyond just a lack of clarity or some miscommunication along the way, which is absolutely a possible manifestation of this new moon, of this aspect in opposition between Jupiter and Mercury, to me, this feels like this time that we are setting an intention to expand and grow. What Mercury and Jupiter are inviting us to really think about is that we are actually remembering so much of who we are at our core. Because when you think about the last couple of seasons, we have had to shed so much. We have had to shed so many layers, perhaps so many relationships or certain situations, certain belief systems around who we are. And in shedding those relationships, those belief systems, we have only gotten closer to the expansiveness and the abundance that exists within, which is essentially what Sagittarius energy reminds us about. When you think about the order in which the signs happen in, we are coming out of Scorpio season, which invites us and sometimes somewhat drags us to go deep beneath the surface, to look at the shadow, to look at the dark stuff, to have the honest conversations, the hard conversations, whether with another or with ourselves. And after a certain amount of time, we need to remember, we need something that reminds us, okay, it's not all dark and dire, right? That's not to say that Scorpio energy is dark and dire all the time. But a lot of its function in the zodiac is to remind us of the importance and the necessity to look at the shadow, to look at the dark and dire, because there's also a lot of wisdom there. But we can only take so much of that, right? We can only remain in that space so much because thankfully we still have a life to live. And so follow the sign of Sagittarius that says, okay, this is great. We have greater wisdom from within. Now, let's take a step outside of all of that shadow, of all of that heavy processing, and let's go out into the world. Let's go out into the world with the wisdom that we've discovered we have within, and let's go learn some more. Let's go teach others about the wisdom, right? So, this new moon in Sagittarius to me feels like, especially with a Mercury retrograde, right? A Mercury retrograde that is about reconsidering, revisiting, it's about reviewing, right? As I was thinking about this, as I was thinking about how to interpret this new moon, I'm like, I think that this is a new moon of remembering ourselves, of remembering our wisdom. And Jupiter retrograde in Gemini to me has felt a lot like, okay, I have learned so much from teachers, from mentors, from coaches, from books, from podcasts, right? I'm very fortunate, we are all very fortunate to have so many resources at our disposal. Okay. But with Jupiter retrograde in Gemini, not only has it been a time of integrating a lot of the lessons that I've learned this year, but it has also been a time of choosing which lessons I take in, which teachings I find resonate with me, and kind of chuck the rest. And when we take the time to do that, our perception of life changes. We learn something new. Our brain, our mind, our knowledge, our wisdom is not the same, right? It has been enhanced by more knowledge or more wisdom. And that's a Jupiter retrograde at the time of this new moon. Every new moon represents a new beginning, and this is a new moon, right? That opens up a 6-month energetic window that ends with the full moon in Sagittarius of June 2025. And we would usually set an intention to take action on something, right? Because Sagittarius is a sign of action, is a sign that needs to do. It's a sign that needs to forge ahead, go forward, especially coming out of a Scorpio energy, out of a Scorpio season in which we had to make certain decisions, right? But what the retrogrades are telling us is not so fast. Not so fast. You can have an optimistic outlook. You can celebrate everything you've learned, everything you've been through, but you still need some time to integrate. You still need some time to understand what your truth is at this moment in time, right? Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius is the same thing. And I think what really matters here is Stephen Forrest describes one of the evolutionary purposes of Sagittarius energy is to devote oneself to a quest for meaning and higher purpose. Now, I think that that can look like a lot of different things for different people, right? But as someone who has multiple planets in Sagittarius, personally, this feels like my life, right? The understanding, I feel like I'm always on a quest for meaning and higher purpose in everything that I do, in the way that I spend my time, in the way that I spend my days. But it doesn't come without experiencing life and it doesn't come without what life is showing me. It doesn't come without what my relationships are showing me, what my therapy sessions are showing me, right? And so from Virgo, Libra, and Scorpio season, here we are in a new moon that wants to start new, but the retrogrades are telling us we still need to integrate. And what I really think we're integrating is, what is my meaning of life now? What do I now believe is my higher purpose in life, right? For some people, it can mean, you know what? My family is the most important thing to me. I work with a lot of new parents, mostly new mothers, right? And so that transition, particularly the first year of especially if it's their first child is a heavy transformative transition, right? Um, so that's something that it takes a little bit of time to realize I can't focus on all of the things that I used to focus on. I have to really reduce it to this one. And how important is this one, right? And how are the other things adding to the support of my family, right? For other people, this is the meaning of my work. This is how I want to live my life. This is how I want to share what I know. This is how I want to teach what I know. For other people, it really became about being intentional with meaningful relationships that support an outlook, that support a grander vision. So, as beautiful as this new moon in Sagittarius is, before we can just forge ahead and go towards that future as quickly as Sagittarius energy likes to move, we first need to understand our why. And I think that this is asking us that. I think that that's exactly what this is asking, because this new moon, right, the sun and the moon at 9 degrees Sagittarius also create a square to Saturn in Pisces. And so Saturn right there says, not just yet, not just yet. So Saturn and Sagittarius can represent certain responsibilities that we first have to meet before we move forward, right? So in a more practical interpretation of this new moon, this can mean I want to move out of where I live, but I'm doing the research, right? Jupiter retrograde in Gemini, Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius. I'm doing the research. I'm seeing what's within my budget. I'm talking to different people. I'm checking different options. And the square to Saturn in Pisces can say, okay, so you've done the research, you know some things, you have some options. Do you have the budget? How much is this going to cost you? There are things, there are responsibilities that first have to be met before we can step into this expansive new thing in our life, this expansive intention, this expansive new opportunity. Saturn in Pisces squaring this new moon is not to hinder that expansiveness, but it is to make sure that we are making a decision from a very grounded place, right? We also have Mars in Leo in opposition to Pluto in Aquarius. Mars, which by the way, is also getting ready to retrograde. Mars, the sign, Mars, the planet of action. But Mars in opposition to Pluto in a higher expression, in an integrated expression for that matter, is I'm willing to show up day in and day out. I'm willing to put in the work, but more importantly, I am willing to be patient, because a Mars retrograde is about asking ourselves, why do I want to move in the direction that I want to move in? So notice how planets are either retrograde or getting ready to retrograde in a new moon that is incredibly expansive. When we have these seeming delays, right, these seeming impediments, I always look at it as perfect timing and as a blessing, because it just means that there is information we don't have. There are resources that we don't have yet, right? That doesn't mean that the resources won't come. We just don't have them yet. And anything that is a delay is a blessing in disguise. Everything and anything. I firmly believe that with every part of my being, because I believe that the universe is on our side. So when we look at this chart, we look at how mutable it is, right? We have three planets, three placements, right? Mercury, the planet, and the two luminaries, the sun and the moon, in Sagittarius, Jupiter in Gemini. We have Neptune and Saturn in Pisces. The only mutable sign that is not activated right now is Virgo, but we have three of four. That's pretty mutable energy. And so what does that call us to do? It calls us to be flexible. It calls us to, it's almost like keep your eye on the prize, but remain flexible in the approach, because there are things that not only you do not know yet, but that you do not have yet, and that is okay. And more importantly, at our core, I think we are still integrating this clarity of remembering who we are in order to step into this new expansive intention, into this new expansive opportunity, into this new expansive situation, knowing and having a clearer idea of who we have become. I stress this when it comes especially to Sagittarius energy, because there's a lot of wisdom there. And I don't think we realize how long integration actually takes, because we're so busy, right? Living life so quickly. We're so busy all of the time. And I get that. It's kind of the nature of what of the world that we live in. And when things slow down, that is our opportunity to do exactly that, to integrate, especially such heavy lessons that you've had over the last couple of months. I really invite you to think about it. What are significant changes that you have experienced September, October, November that you understand are big, whether it's, external situations changing for positive or maybe not so positive, but also who you have become along the process. Because I guarantee you that anything that has unfolded in your external reality has been a result of the person you have become internally. That's big. And for it to happen in a span of like 10 to 12 weeks is not a long time. And so I'm really glad that we have so many retrogrades and so much energy of transition and integration with the new moon in Sagittarius that just kind of wants to take off right away. Another thing that we have to remember is that mutable energy are is energy of transition, right? Because the mutable signs are the signs that come right before the cardinal signs, right? And cardinal signs in the zodiac are known to be the times in which we take action, right? So Gemini comes before Cancer. Cancer is a cardinal sign. It begins the summer, right? The summer season here in the Northern Hemisphere. Sagittarius comes right before Capricorn, Capricorn, a cardinal sign, which begins the winter season here in the Northern Hemisphere. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac that comes right before Aries, which is the beginning of the zodiac. It's the beginning of spring here in the Northern Hemisphere. It's the beginning of the year for a lot of cultures and traditions. So these mutable energies will always represent the things that are happening before the thing actually starts and begins. Okay. Now, will we have to wait too long to begin to take action or begin seeing things move forward? I don't think so. Not at all. One, because on December 5th, we are going to have the Sun Mercury Cazimi in the sign of Sagittarius. It is the halfway point of the Mercury retrograde Sagittarius cycle we are in. It is when Mercury and the Sun come together, and that represents a moment of illumination, a moment of information that we receive that we didn't have that helps us move forward, right? And then we have the new moon in Capricorn on December 30th, right before the year ends. And then in January, the nodes switch signs. So it's not like we have to wait too long to understand and to kind of get like a grip, like a good grip as to how we're moving forward. This new moon in Sag is great to work on things behind the scenes, whatever that means for you. So let's say that you're someone who wants to move by January. Okay, well, this is the time that you begin to clean, that you begin to pack, that you begin to donate things, throw things out, right? Let's say that you're someone who wants to submit a book proposal. Well, this is the time where you write it, where you have someone check it for you, right? Let's say that you're someone who wants to look for a new job in the new year. Well, this is the time that you do your research, that you update your resume. So when we're looking at this from a practical perspective, Mercury retrogrades are always a great time to do those things. And it's important that we understand that whatever delays we experience are so on purpose. Now, overall, we have to remember that another evolutionary theme for the sign of Sagittarius is that it wants to live a life that feels meaningful. It wants to live a life that feels expansive in every way. Are we aiming for perfection? Absolutely not. Are we aiming to just be happy all the time? Absolutely not. That's actually the lower expression of Sagittarius Jupiter energy, and that would probably come with avoidance of responsibilities, avoidance of looking at the things that we actually have to take care of. But when you think about everything that has unfolded for you over the last couple of months, how can you deny what you've seen, right? You can't. You cannot unsee what you've seen in the last couple of months about how necessary it is for you to let go of or discard certain things in order for you to actually be much more connected to joy on a more consistent basis. And this matters a lot because Sagittarius is one of the signs that reminds us of the importance of joy in our life in order for there to be growth. Because without that, how can we ever see or believe in the light at the end of the tunnel? How can we ever actually believe that we are unconditionally loved, guided, and supported by a higher power? And when you think about that, considering that Saturn in Pisces is also activated, and Pisces is the energy, the sign that reminds us of trusting in something greater and something bigger. I think this new moon in Sagittarius is saying before you begin that next thing, can you harness your energy and create a connection to faith, to the belief in something greater, to your relationship to spirit, to source, to your soul, to the light that you carry within? And that's how real expansion happens. Because as I mentioned in last week's video, when I talked about Pluto and Aquarius, the way that we're going to begin manifesting as a whole, connecting as a whole, having synchronicities in our lives, and by a whole, I mean as a collective consciousness, is that we begin to really function from the technology within us of attraction, of frequency, of elevating consciousness, right? I don't want to repeat myself too much, but this is important to remember because that's what we are in. It's not even like we're headed that way. We are there already. And so Sagittarius season having started with such a beautiful aspect to Pluto at 0 degrees Aquarius, it's important that we remember that growth and expansion can be ours, but we have to be willing to not think that we have to do it all ourselves, but that there is aid and help and divine guidance. We have to. Because if we forget that that is available to us, the world can feel very small, very limited, and very, very scary. And that's simply not true. Thank you all so much for joining me this week. As always, may this be of service. So much love to you all. Don't forget that I'm offering the 2025 year ahead reading. If you're interested, the link is below. Other than that, I will talk to you next week. Much love.